11 lives were lost in just 48 hours. A mountain is so lethal, it's known as the Savage Mountain. This is the story of K2, the world's second highest peak, where dreams of conquest often end in tragedy.
11 other climbers died trying to conquer the world's second highest peak.
K2 is the second highest mountain in the world. It's 8,611 meters, or 28,251 feet high. Many people know about Mount Everest, but K2 is actually much more dangerous. On August 1st, 2008, a group of 25 climbers started climbing K2. The weather looked good that day. The sky was clear, and the climbers felt hopeful. They thought they would have a successful climb, but they had no idea that something terrible was about to happen. In the next 2 days, these climbers would face one of the worst disasters in the history of mountain climbing. By the time it was over, 11 of the 25 climbers had died. That means almost half of the group didn't make it. The few climbers who survived were left wondering what went so wrong. Why is K2 more dangerous than the other mountains? What happened during these 2 scary days in 2008? Let's look at the story of this deadly climb and try to understand why K2 is known as one of the most dangerous places in the world. K2 isn't just any mountain. It's like a monster made of rock and ice. More than 80 people have died trying to climb it. Here's why K2 is so tough. On Everest, climbers can choose from several paths to the top. Some are easier than others, but on K2, every path is hard. The mountain is very steep. Its slopes go up to angles of 45 degrees or more. That's really steep. The ground on K2 is a mix of limestone, rock, and ice, which makes it very slippery. One wrong step could cause a climber to fall thousands of meters down the mountain. K2 has its own weather system, which can change very fast. A nice sunny day can turn into a deadly snowstorm in minutes, making climbing K2 even more dangerous. There's a high chance of being hit by fallen ice on K2, but this doesn't happen as often as on other big mountains. Even with all these dangers, many climbers want to climb K2. For them, it's the biggest challenge. If they make it to the top of K2, it's like winning a really hard game, but this win can cost them their lives. As we'll see in the story of what happened in August 2008. On August 1st, 2008, 25 climbers left Camp 4 on K2. Camp 4 is very high up. It's 7,800 meters. They all wanted to reach the top of the mountain. The weather looked perfect. The sky was clear. There wasn't much wind, and it wasn't too cold. This was the kind of day climbers dream about, especially on K2, where good weather is rare. But even with good weather, climbing K2 is very dangerous. Climbers have to race against time. They need to get to the top and back down before the weather changes or before it gets dark. At night, the mountain becomes even more dangerous. It gets very cold and climbers can't see where they're going. On this day, the climbers had many delays. These delays pushed them back behind schedule. One of the hardest parts of climbing K2 is a place called the bottleneck. It's a steep, narrow path that climbers must go through to reach the top. The bottleneck is very dangerous because of the seracs. Seracs are huge blocks of ice that can fall without warning. If a serac falls, it can send tons of ice crashing down onto climbers. As the climbers went on, the bottleneck became very chaotic. There were climbers from many different countries: Norway, the Netherlands, South Korea, Serbia, the United States, France, Spain, and Italy. They were all trying to make their way to the dangerous part of the mountain. In this group was a Serbian climber named Dren Mandic. He was having a hard time with the tough conditions. Mandic made a big mistake. He unclipped his safety rope. He might have done this to fix his oxygen mask or to pass another climber, but this one action led to a terrible accident. Mandic lost his balance and started to fall. The other climbers could only watch as he tumbled down the steep slope. His body spun out of control as he fell down the bottleneck. When Mandic finally stopped falling, he was still alive. Climbers at Camp 4 saw him stand up. They thought he had somehow survived the big fall without getting hurt. But then Mandic fell down again. This time he didn't get back up. He was the first person to die that day. The news about Mandic's death spread quickly to the other climbers. It made them realize how dangerous K2 really is. Soon after, 2 of Mandic's Serbian teammates and a Pakistani climber named Jan Bayek tried to bring Mandic's body back to Camp 4. But during this rescue attempt, another tragedy happened. Bayek was already very tired and scared. He lost his grip while holding onto the rope tied to Mandic's body. Bayek started to slide down the mountain. He went faster and faster. The other climbers watched in horror as Bayek didn't try to stop himself. He should have used a technique called self-arrest that climbers learn to stop themselves from falling, but he didn't. Instead, Bayek fell over the edge of a big snow cliff and disappeared. Now 2 climbers had died. Even after these 2 deaths, the other climbers decided to keep going up the mountain. As they got close to the top, they started to worry. The ropes they needed to climb safely were in bad shape. They found some old ropes from last year. This rope had been out in the harsh weather for a whole year. It wasn't very safe, but it was all they had. One Norwegian climber, Rolf Bay, decided it was too dangerous. He turned back when he was just 100 meters from the top, but he told his wife Cecile Skog and their friend Lars Nessa to keep going. Bay waited and watched them climb. The first person to reach the top was Albert Serrain, a climber from Spain. He got there at 3 p.m. He told the other climbers it would only take 1 more hour to reach the top. One by one, the climbers made it to the top. They were very tired, but also very happy. But by the time the last climber, Marco Confortola, reached the top at 7:30 p.m., it was getting dark. The sun was setting, and soon it would be completely dark on K2. By 8:30 p.m., it was totally dark on the mountain. The climbers had to start going back down. This was when things got really bad. 2 climbers, Wilco van Rugen and Hughes de Bordet, started going down around 7:30 p.m. De Bordet was having a lot of trouble. He was moving slowly and seemed confused. He didn't have enough oxygen and he was worried he wouldn't make it back to Camp 4. As Van Rugen was carefully climbing down the bottleneck in the dark, he heard a very scary sound. He saw someone fall past him, dropping into the darkness below. He thought it was Bordet, who had fallen because he was too tired to keep going. At the same time, Marco Confortola, who was resting further down the mountain, heard screams. He saw faint lights from headlamps disappear after a loud noise. They think the person both men saw fall was Bordet. He had run out of oxygen hours before and was too tired to climb safely. As the night went on, more bad things happened. Early the next morning, Wilco van Rugen couldn't find the ropes he needed to climb down safely. He decided to go down alone. His eyes were hurting, and he was afraid he was going snowblind. Being snowblind on a mountain is very dangerous because you can't see where you're going. As Van Rugen was going down, he found the Korean climbers and their guide, Jumik Bote. They were in big trouble. They were all tangled up in ropes. Some were hanging upside down. They were hurt, but still alive. Back at Camp 4, people were trying to help. The leader of the Korean team, Mr. Kim, sent 2 Sherpas named Tesering Bote and Pasang Bote to save the 3 Korean climbers and their guide. Later that morning, Confortola and another climber named Gerard MacDonald reached the Korean group. They worked very hard to untangle them from the ropes. MacDonald was very brave. He stayed behind to keep helping with Confortola, who was very tired, and started to go back down. But then another terrible thing happened. Around noon, a huge avalanche of snow and ice crashed through the bottleneck. When Confortola woke up from a short sleep on the mountain, he saw a body partially buried in the snow. They think it was Gerard MacDonald, who had been swept away by the avalanche. The worst part came later that afternoon. Another big piece of ice fell from above. It swept away the 3 Korean climbers, their Sherpa guide, and one of the Sherpas who came to help. Only Tesering Bote, who was climbing more slowly, survived. In just a few hours, 5 more people had died on the mountain. Even with all of this danger, some climbers still try to help others. Pemba Gyaljet was determined to save Confortola, who was still stuck between the bottleneck. Pemba went alone to help him. He managed to help Confortola, who was barely conscious, down the mountain. Confortola was very tired and had severe frostbite. He had been out in the harsh conditions of K2 for more than 30 hours. Meanwhile, Wilco van Rugen was in big trouble. He couldn't see and didn't know where he was in the mountain. He used his radio to call for help from his friends at Camp 4. Pemba and another climber named Cas van den Gevel tried to find Wilco near Camp 3. They were guided by radio messages from someone at base camp who could see them through a telescope. They finally found Wilco. He was snowblind at this point, very thirsty, and had severe frostbite. By the evening of August 3rd, Pemba, Cass, and Wilco finally made it to the base camp. Wilco got medical help right away from his frozen toes and hands. Later, they rescued Marco Confortola too. All of them were barely alive after their terrible experience. When the surviving climbers got back to base camp, they did something sad but meaningful. They shared a can of beer that Gerald MacDonald had saved to celebrate making it back safely. It was a sad moment as they remembered their friends who had died. Marco Confortola, who had been on the mountain for 4 miserable days, was the last one to be taken off the mountain by helicopter. In the end, 11 people died on K2 in just 48 hours. This is why people call K2 the Savage Mountain. No one climbed to the top of K2 again until 2011, but the memory of those who died in 2008 stayed with the survivors for a long time. For those who try to climb K2, it's not just about being skilled and prepared. They also need a lot of luck. K2 is a mountain that demands respect. Even the best climbers in the world can find themselves in danger of K2. The events of August 2008 teach us important lessons. Nature is very powerful, and we must respect it. Even with good planning, things can go wrong very quickly in dangerous places. Climbing the world's highest mountains is extremely risky, and climbers must be prepared for the worst. Sometimes a desire to reach a goal, like the top of a mountain, can cloud people's judgment about safety. In dangerous situations, people can show incredible bravery, like those who risk their lives to help others on K2. The story of what happened on K2 in 2008 is a reminder of how small and vulnerable humans are compared to the huge, powerful mountains of the world. It shows us the incredible strength of the human spirit, but also the high price that sometimes comes with pushing the limits of what's possible. As we remember those who lost their lives on K2, We're reminded of the respect we must have for the natural world and the care we must take when we explore its most challenging places. That's all for today's video on the tragic events of K2 in 2008. Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Lastly, AfterRender produces our YouTube videos. They specialize in YouTube video production. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.